I'm brewing again. This time it's a Scottish ale. Not quite sure what made me pick this one up. I think I was in a hurry and I just looked for whatever was about 4%. Because I'm kind of liking the session beers lately, probably because it's summer. I'm going to pour a milk stout. Got a nice warm glass here, which I think is appropriate for a stout. And I've cranked, I don't leave it like this, but I cranked the pressure up. Can't really see, whatever. It's at about 10 pounds. Hopefully that will cause it to be sort of like a can of Guinness or Murphy's. They tend to have a little gizmo in them, which when you open the can, releases a whole lot of nitrogen, which causes a whole lot of bubbles, just like that. And this stuff is best in bubble form. Whether it's this stout or any other stout, that's why they put those things in there. That's really, really good at first. But let me switch views here. I like to actually know if I'm in the shot and if the thing is still running. It has a tendency to just shut down. Okay. The thing is with this, in spite of being really, really, really good, is it has a bitter aftertaste. It's a weird bitter, which makes me wonder if it's an off flavor due to some brewing mistake. It's definitely an off flavor for me because I don't like it. It's something that's on the back of the tongue, on the sides, sort of just on the sides, and then you can just feel it over the next few seconds. It just sort of slowly creeps over the top of the tongue, and it's really strange, and it's really annoying. And I think it tastes like, if you ever taste the difference between Murphy's and Guinness, you'll notice that Murphy's is kind of sweeter. I like Murphy's a little better than Guinness. But Guinness has this sort of little bitter taste to it, which I think it's the same bitterness as what's in here, but it's not as strong. And I'm hoping that's the case, because then maybe I can just tone down a hop or something. Like maybe it's the German Magnum. And it'll go away. Maybe I've got used to it, because it's a lot better today. Okay, now there's an example of my camera just shutting down mysteriously on me. And why did it happen? Because I'm using my phone, because it has a really good camera on it, and because someone on Facebook Messenger messaged me. Now, where was I? Oh yeah, okay, so you have the Guinness on the one hand, which I think has the same bitterness to it. It's been a long time since I've had a Guinness, probably since I started brewing my own. And on the other hand, you have my stuff, which is much stronger. But way, way stronger than that was a batch of brew that I made in the Mr. Beer 2-gallon kit. And it wasn't a Mr. Beer kit that I bought, it was some other brand, but I made a pre-hopped extract kit with no added ingredients. It was just what they sent me. No hops, no boil, nothing like that. And bottled it in PET bottles. And when I tried to drink it, it was almost undrinkable. I think most people would have thrown it out, but it was because this weird bitterness was so bitter that it almost burned. And it had to be. It had to be some weird off flavor, some weird product of how I brewed it. Maybe I don't know. I don't know how to recognize off flavors and what they are. But it was pretty bad. And I can't tell if this is more like the Guinness bitterness or more like that weird bitterness that was so bad as an off flavor. It is interesting though, maybe it's psychological, that tonight this off flavor is not as strong to me. And it may be that whenever I'm first tasting a beer, which I guess I had this a couple nights ago for the first time, and last night, I was probably more worried about, is there something wrong with it or not? And then you kind of fool yourself. But It's actually pretty good. I don't like that bitter aftertaste, but if I just let myself forget about it, it's fairly easy to forget. And let's take a look down here. This right here is a fermenter that I filled with properly mixed one-step percarbonate cleaner. And right now I'm going to edit in a video from, I don't know what it was, a week ago. Today is, well, it's just after midnight right now on the 11th, so we'll know how many days it's been. I recently read on an internet message board where someone wrote that percarbonates, such as this one step right here, not only does not make a good sanitizer, but also does not make a good cleaner. This has been contrary to my experience, in which I have used it to remove dried-on Krausenkoller by filling the fermenter all the way to the top with properly diluted one step and just let it soak. And Krausenkoller, which seemed like it was just not going to come off at all, would just have disappeared after a couple of days. No scrubbing, I'd look at it and it would be gone. Well, now I have a real test. This is Krausenkoller from a milk stout, which I brewed, I think, about 6 weeks ago. Might have even been a little bit more than that, but that seems about right. And the milk stout has been in this. This was the primary for that whole time. And it required a blow-off tube. It made quite a bit of a mess around the top there, which I cleaned off at the time using Star Sand or something. Yeah, Star Sand. But this rest of it down here was allowed to dry on, and it has been there for weeks. And I just filled this thing up with water. You can see that it's half full. And I was trying to rub this off with a wash rag, and I realized this just wasn't going to come off without some serious effort. So, what I am going to do is fill it up with properly diluted one step and just see how well it does. Now, this fermenting vessel is advertised to be a 6.5 gallon big mouth bubbler. And I have not measured it for myself, but it does have these marks on the side. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you have the place where it sort of slants up to the top, which is probably a half a gallon. So I think it's 6.5 gallons to the top. And I did use a gallon jug to pour the water into here, and these things are about a gallon apart. So, it is off, and you can see how filthy it is now. And right now the percarbonates are going to work. We'll see what happens. And the date is, wow, not very readable on this camera, is it? There we go. 6:49 on August 6th. It is now 7:41, and I just walked into the kitchen to take a look. And it is completely gone, that Krausenkoller. Well, no, there's a couple little dots right there. Okay, now let me show you those little dots again. Right there. Boy, they're hard to see, aren't they? But those little dots that we saw in the other video, they're actually on the outside of the keg. So this thing had cleaned itself full of the one step. It cleaned itself extremely rapidly. That's some very good stuff. Now let me show you one more thing. Inside here, I have 2 kegs, Belgian Saison, milk stout. And you see those little orange dots on those. Those little orange dots inside this can, if you haven't heard about this, well, inside the keg, there is a little ball. It's about the size of a baseball, a little smaller, and it's got a very strong magnet in it. And what you do is you put that magnet in there, well, this ball that floats on the top, you track the magnet to the side using one of these magnets right here. And when it comes over to the side, you stick this little metal orange ball on there, and that tells you how full your keg is. Somebody on the 17brewcrew.com forum, Homebrew forum, brought that up. It's nice to belong to a forum, then you learn weird things that people do. And I am not going to have another one of these. I'm going to have the Belgian Saison because it's lower in alcohol. It's about 5% alcohol. Okay, the thing's still up at around 10 or 12 pounds. But I turned it down, but I'm not going to waste the CO2 by letting it vent. Instead, I'm going to pour a Belgian Saison into a frosty glass with all the foam. And it's doing quite well. Took all the frost off the glass pretty quick. Gotta love kegging. People who told me that kegging was so much better than bottling were so very right. By the way, a lot of people sparge their grain. Me, this is boiling water. I rinse the grain with hot water. Now, what's the difference between sparging and rinsing? I haven't the vaguest clue. But if there is no difference, then why do we need two words? What the heck is this sparge stuff? Me, I just rinse it off. This is my starter. It was a Y yeast 1728, and it was about 24 hours ago that I made this starter, and it's still going. And if you look at it, I'm not sure that if any of this will be picked up on camera, and that's kind of sad, but you can see the bubbles on top a little bit, but you don't see any bubbles coming up. But I've had this turned off, this stir plate, for about 10 minutes, and if I turn it on, I just turned it on, now you see it starting to go, and suddenly there's a whole lot of activity in there. And the point I'm wanting to make with this is that I don't think that the stir plate, the idea about it, when I talk about, or when I see people on videos talking about the stir plate, they seem to think that it's about mixing oxygen in. And I don't think that's necessary. Well, here's what I do, is I actually use an oxygen tank that I got from Home Depot and a air stone, which is actually an metal air stone, stainless steel, and I actually oxygenate the heck out of the starter, so there's plenty of oxygen in there. I think the whole point and purpose of the stir plate is to prevent an overflow. Like when you need a blow-off tube when you're fermenting your beer. If you were to take one of these little flasks and fill it up and put your yeast inside there along with some timer went off somewhere. Sorry about that. I heard that timer go off and had to figure out what it was. Anyway, so I think the point of the stir plate is that it causes that CO2 to constantly be released in a way that doesn't allow it to build up. I don't know. I have had issues with these things when I've had the stir plate turned down too low. I don't know why I would do that. I think I just saw on some video somebody saying, okay, just this much is enough and there's no point putting any more. And I followed the instructions and I ended up with an overflowing flask of starter. And I've had that happen more than once. And after that, I've turned the stir plate up completely as fast as it'll go. And I've never had it overflow since. I think there's something about beating all of the CO2 out of the mix as it's being created that prevents that from happening. Alright, so I took the kettle off the electric burner, put it on this plate here so there would be no heat to burn the extract on the bottom. Here's the empty bag of Mara solder, which was 6.3 pounds. And Mara solder is really good. You could use it for pancake syrup, no problem. And what's this say? 188. This thermometer's got a problem. It's probably only about 183, 184 degrees. It's got to get up to 212 to be boiling. And then I can add the hops. Got a nice little discolored hop bag from a lot of use. A little more. Here's my oxygen tank. Inside this kettle, where it's boiling, it's been boiling for a minute or so, I have my air stone. What am I going to do with that? Well, this is 0-degree water. It's got a little bit of ice around the edges. You can kind of see it on top there. When water and ice are together, that means they're at 0 degrees at normal pressures. And so what I'm going to do that's different from, well, pretty much everybody else, is I oxygenate my water, not my wort. Now this comes from John Palmer. He didn't suggest you do this, but he talked about a survey. Sorry, I'm trying to get this thing open and I need both hands. Wow, that was something. Twisted it on too much before. So, he said that a survey was done where they compared identical beers, except that one had been shake oxygenated and the other had been oxygenated with an air stone, the wort. And they found that the one that had the wort oxygenated with the oxygen tank, that people called it a smaller beer, that they didn't like it as much. And he speculated that using an air stone and oxygenating your wort would oxidize your wort, which isn't good. But at the same time, he tells you that it's not good enough to just shake it, that only, I don't remember what it says, like 12 parts per million or something. I don't remember what he said, but he said it doesn't put enough oxygen in there. So my answer to that was to oxygenate the water that I'm going to dilute my high-gravity wort with, and just let that be. And it's worked out well so far, at least I hope it has. If it hasn't, maybe it's responsible for that bitter flavor. Who knows? Oh, and here is my very clear, rinsed out. I actually washed it out with some antibacterial hand soap. Very, very light amount of it. But it came completely clean. If you've ever bought a Mr. Beer or a Cooper's, like the whole Cooper's setup for fermenting beer, you know that they use percarbonates. They call it sanitizer. So I figure everything's clean in there to begin with, but I also sprayed it down with Star San, and it is waiting for me. One more thing. This is my wort chiller. It is a stainless steel wort chiller. Most people use copper wort chillers, which discolor and just look like crap over time, and that has to make people think that, I don't know, it would make me feel kind of bad about my beer. Now, the reason that people think that copper is the thing to use is because it's a better conductor than stainless steel, like what I'm using. But the difference between the conductivity of stainless steel versus the conductivity of copper is so small it would never be noticed by a home brewer. I've also got about 4 1/4 inches of wort in here, and that's with the wort chiller in there. If I take the wort chiller out, well, it's actually about 4 1/4 without the wort chiller. It's a little higher with it. What I actually need, if I'm going to make 20 liters of this, which is what I aim for, if I'm going to have half of it be the cold water and half of it be my wort, I'm going to need 4 1/2 inches. So I'm heating up a little bit of water in this kettle. As soon as it gets up to boiling, so I know it's sterile, I'll put it in here up to 4 1/2 inches. Is that right? Yeah, 4 1/2 inches. and then I'll be off to the races. At that point, I'll mix it in my fermenter, along with my 0 degree, let's see, 0 degree water, which this thing just tends to stop bubbling up after a second. And there it goes. See that? So I just get this stuff oxygenated. That's how I do it. Alright, so this cooled down really, really fast. If it took 2 minutes, I'd be surprised. It's probably more like a minute and a half. This says 43°C. This is an infrared thermometer. It says 36. I don't know, split the difference. Sometimes, like if I use the infrared on the side here, what does it come up with? 35? Well, that's not so bad. So this may be only 34, 35 degrees. I know that this is always high. Usually it's about 6 degrees high. So that when I mix this half and half with the 0 degree water, I should get it down to around 20%. 20 degrees. So that I can pitch the yeast. And the point is, I mean, it was like 2 minutes. And people are buying copper wort chillers that discolor and look ugly over time, whereas this thing, when you clean it up, it looks exactly the same after every single use. I would buy one of these silver serpents if I were you. So let's take a look. I star sand the heck out of this thing in order to scoop the mixed wort out to fill my cylinder, which appears to be somewhere around 4.4, looks like. The instructions say to expect, what does it say? Oh, well, let's forget those. Let's look down here. 1.043, so that's pretty darn close. The temperature, using the infrared, 23.3, 23.2, yeah, whatever. Could be a little lower. And here, the yeast, 21.9, it's a little less, which is good. Time to pitch the yeast. And other than cleaning up all this mess, which really isn't all that bad, probably take me, I'll bet it takes less than 10 minutes, somewhere between 5 and 10. I'll be done. You thought it was over? Shame on you. Had just about the worst thing that could possibly happen. Well, that's not true. The worst thing that could happen would be you drop your fermenter and spill it all over your floor. But what I did is I had my starter, and you have the little stir bar at the bottom, which is magnetic, right? And you don't want to dump that into your fermenter, right? So what I did was I took a small magnet off of there. It comes with the small magnet. I didn't use that small magnet because it wasn't as handy. I used the small magnet that I had stuck to my fridge, stuck it to the bottom of this to hold on to this thing to keep it from going into the fermenter. And what happened as I poured it, the thing slid down towards the bottom, like this thing is now, and when it went, the little magnet slid off the bottom of the flask and went straight into the fermenter. Now what I did was I got the long spoon that comes with a Cooper's fermenting kit, and I scooped out the little magnet from the bottom of the wort. But if any kind of infection shows up, that'll be why. It'll be some kind of germ that was stuck to my fingers at various times that I've touched that magnet for one reason or another, which may be now in the beer. And if you think of it from a food service perspective, you know, you don't want that kind of thing happening when a cook or a chef in some restaurant is making your food. However, from a scientific perspective, most germs do not last very long out of the kind of environment within which they can actually grow. So if something's stuck to a magnet or something, even if there was a germ on it, it would tend to die fairly quickly. And that's it, I guess. We'll see what happens. But this can be a test. Will anybody actually notice? Will anyone make it to the end of the video? I'm not a real big fan of Homebrew Wednesday videos because I think they're a little bit self-indulgent. People think that they're more interesting than they actually are. I think no matter how many followers you can have thousands of followers, and most people are going to watch just a little bit of the video, give it a thumbs up, and then they'll be gone. There are some people like Craig, I think, with Craig Faraway, with CraigTube. I make it through quite a few of his videos, and I've actually tried to figure out what it is that I and other people like about him. Or maybe a better way to put it isn't that I've tried to figure out what people like about him. It's more like what people like about watching his videos. And it's just that he's such a likable guy. Number one, it's not just that. I shouldn't say it's just that, because there's the other thing. He's described himself as a perfectionist more than once. And I think that before he makes a video, before he actually publishes a video and puts it out, I think he puts quite a lot of effort into making sure that he's separated the wheat from the chaff, that he's made it as short as possible. He's done, and he's got some expertise in the technical area. So he makes it look easy, even though it isn't. It's easy. It may be easy for him after enough time of learning, but for the rest of us, it's not anywhere near as easy as he makes it look. Plus, he's a very likable guy. And, I don't know, I maybe watch 1 out of 4 of his videos, but if you think of how long his videos are, that's really quite a lot. He's doing really quite well in terms of getting a following of people who want to see his videos. Anyway, that's it for this Homebrew Wednesday. I guess by title, it's at least the very first one I've done. And that's it. And I'm only calling it a Homebrew Wednesday because it's Wednesday, to be published on Thursday. So that's it for a Homebrew Wednesday, which was far too long. There were several things in there. Tasting the milk stout, the cleaning using the percarbonates, and then the brewing. I'll try to get these things done in much shorter time from here on out. Then some people might actually make it to the end of the video. Till next time.